Thank you very much. Thank you, Rabbi Mazer. It's nice to see you again on a Mizrahi Canada program. The next one should be for Simchis, only for Simchis. Thank you very much for co-hosting this entire conference and for your kind words and for being the moderator at our panel. It's a pleasure to be on a session with Yoetzet Halacha Nechama Price, who we know very well, and with my wife Yocheved, who is an extraordinary professional and an extraordinary person. I want to thank Nishmat for being very much involved in the visioning of this entire conference. Rabbanit Henkin for her inspiring leadership for decades, and a particular Hakar Satov on behalf of the thousands who have signed on for this conference, to Rabbanit Yoetzet Halacha Atara Eis, who has devoted just an unbelievable amount of time and energy, Yimamish, Yomam Valayla, to ensure its success. I am very much overwhelmed by what happened in Meron. I was invited, I don't know, 2-3 months ago, maybe 2 months ago, to participate in this program. And I thought I had a bit of a sense of what it is that I wanted to share. And then I found that whatever it was that I had in mind to share rang hollow. As we speak right now, there's a levaya going on in Yeshivat Shalvim for Donnie Morris, Zichrono Livracha, young man, neighbor of ours in Bergenfield, who was caught up in the crush of what happened in Meron. It is incomprehensible, and the incredulity and the pain and the questions are enormous. Yocheved mentioned that in our family we had losses already. During COVID, our mechutin, our sister-in-law, Nechama mentioned her grandmother. This has been, for us, for our families, and for many families, a very, very difficult and challenging time. So what can one say? After all, we have a long history of dealing with challenges. We've been struggling to deal with the Churban Beit HaMikdash, the impact of which continues to haunt us. And there's a whole litany of tragedies that we've suffered through the ages. Asara Aruge Malchus in the 2nd century, the Crusaders in the 11th and 12th centuries, the Black Death massacres in the 13th century, the 14th century, Tach V'Tat, 1648, 1649, Khmelnytsky massacres in the 17th century. But there's a difference between then and now in terms of Meron, because Meron is an inside experience. It wasn't perpetrated on us by outsiders. It's a Jewish tragedy. It's a uniquely Jewish story and a uniquely Jewish tragedy. The Gemara says in Maseches Rosh Hashanah that we have a special fast day. It's known as Tzom Gedalia. In the pasuk, it's known as Tzom Hashvi'i. Ze Gimel B'Tishrei Shebo Nehera Gedalia ben Achikam. Umi Harogo Yishmael ben Netanya Harogo L'Lamedcha Sheshkula Misosan Shel Tzadikim Kisreifas Beis Elokei. Why do we fast on Tzom Gedalia? Because the Misa of Tzadikim is the equivalent of the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. And if we have a fast day to commemorate the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, we're going to have a fast day to commemorate Misas Tzadikim. So the Pnei Yoshua, 18th century commentary on many Mesachtas and Shas on this daf in Rosh Hashanah, My Ulma Misas Gedalia Tfei Mishar Misas Tzadikim. He's not the only tzaddik who died. Kigon Misas Ha'avos, Moshe, Aaron, Shmuel, Vishar Neviim, Tzadike Yisrael, Sefeltois, Tzadikim who died. Vosepis is a Yachsin. Why is Gedalia ben Achikam chosen? L'lamedcha sheshkula misasan shel tzadikim. Kisreifas beis Elokeinu, there were other tzadikim who were nifter. And he answers, because this event was a inner Jewish event. There were two Jews here who were involved with one another. This is a Jewish tragedy, a tragedy that involves one Jew and another Jew and another Jew. And a Jewish tragedy is different. This is not Stama Misa. This is a collective story, a Jewish story. And so it's different from all of the other externally perpetrated tragedies. And it's different than a Misa of a tzaddik, because when it's a Jewish story, it's particularly painful. It is particularly painful. I'm on a rabbinic listserv, and there are hundreds probably of rabbis on this listserv. And on Erev Shabbos, Rav Doron Peretz shared on this listserv the Dvar Torah that he received or heard from his Rav Hillel Merzbach. And I have already heard this Dvar Torah quoted over Shabbat, but I would like to share it because I think there's a lot of wisdom here. And again, I share it with a great deal of diffidence and lack of confidence, because we're mamish still, in the case of Meron, it's Meso Muto Lefanav, Ein Menachamin, B'shah Shemeso Muto Lefanav. And it's Meron that is at the forefront of our minds, as Rabbi Mazer mentioned at the very beginning of his remarks, obviously. I got an email last night that I'm sure all of you got, that the entire conference was starting a little bit earlier to give us all an opportunity to recite Tehillim. But it was conceived of as trying to crawl out from under what we have all experienced this past year. And my two previous distinguished fellow panelists addressed that issue very, very beautifully and meaningfully. So we know that Lag BaOmer is a shtickle yamtiv because the Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva stopped dying. Shas pasku milamos. And the Pri Chodesh, a very prominent Mefarish on the Shulchan Aruch, whose commentary is found in the back of the classic editions of the Shulchan Aruch, asks, and I must say, I've been through decades of Lag BaOmers, and this question never occurred to me until Rav Peretz sent it out. The Pri Chodesh asks, what kind of a Yom Tov is this? Doesn't make any sense at all. Do you know why they stopped dying? Because there were none left to die. 24,000 students already died. They stopped dying. So who's going to die anymore? It's a big Yom Tov that they stopped dying. They're dead. They're gone. It's over. It's not like there were any left. If there were any left, they also would have died. So what's the big deal? What are we celebrating? Shas pasku milamos? Shas pasku milamos because God took all of them. Finished. What's the shtickle simcha? I can go take a haircut. I can have a wedding. Siman tov, mazel tov. They all died. What's going on here? It's an eisen akasha. I'm kicking myself. It never occurred to me. And he says something very powerful. He says, what Lag BaOmer is all about is not the past. Lag BaOmer is not about they stopped to die. What Lag BaOmer is all about is the next line in the Gemara in Yevamos. What does the next line in the Gemara in Yevamos say? The Rabbi Akiva, the Rebbe of all these Talmidim who had such an unbelievably mournful experience, picked himself up and he trained 5 more Talmidim. He went to the Dorom, He found more Talmidim, Behem Hem She'amidu Tole Yisrael. And this is resilience. And this is going forward. This is acknowledging the tragedy. But somehow we, the Jewish people, have this capacity to be able to transcend the enormity of the tragedy. Just stop for a second. The Midrashim and the Gemara, they have different versions. It was 12,000 students, it was 12,000 pairs of students. There are different nuschos in this story. So let's say 12,000. 12,000 students, you know how many hours he devoted? We're teachers, we know what it means to devote to Talmidim and Talmidot. We know what that means. 12,000. And they're gone. You'd imagine Rabbi Akiva would say, you know what, I gave it a shot. I spent a chatzi lifetime trying to inspire 12,000, 24,000 Talmidim. Okay, you know what, I'm overwhelmed. I don't have any energy. But that's not what happened. And in a sense, that is what I think, for me, is a takeaway. We are bitterly overwhelmed by tragedy and by challenge. It's incomprehensible. It's incomprehensible. So I don't know where the kayach comes from, but we have, as a people, a long history of overcoming, of having a life after a churban, and having a life after the Crusades, and after the Black Death massacres, and after the burning of the Talmud, and after Khmelnytsky, and after the Shoah. Yocheved mentioned it earlier. That what we look for and look towards is there are more Talmidim, there's more hope, there's more inspiration. Somehow. We can put one foot in front of another. I want to conclude with a story in the Navi that I quoted probably 14 months ago when this whole epidemic first started. I quoted a story in Malachim Bey's Perek Dalet. And to me, this has helped to sustain me personally in the course of these last number of months, over a year. You remember the woman who comes to Elisha and says, Nebuch, what am I going to do? My husband died. I have 2 sons, and now the creditor wants to come and take away my 2 sons. And I have nothing. I have nothing to give him. I owe him money. I don't have money. He's going to take my sons. So the Navi Elisha says, tell me, Ma yesh lach babayis, what do you have at home? And she says, I have a little oil. So he says, go to your neighbors, take some vessels, borrow some vessels, bring it to your house, close the door, take the oil, and it's going to be a miracle, and all the vessels are going to be filled up. And then you're going to sell the vessels, you're going to make money from the oil, you're going to pay the creditor, Shalom on Yisrael, everything is going to be fine. It's a very well-known story. I draw your attention to the question that Elisha asked this woman, Isha achas minishe b'nei neviim. He says to her, Ma e'eseh lach, what can I do for you? Hagidi li ma yesh lach babayis, what do you have at home? What does he not say? He does not say to her, tell me, do you have anything at home that could help you? That's not what he says. He says, what do you have at home? Because he knows that she does have something at home. You've got something at home. You have something at home that's going to be the instrument of your salvation. You have something at home that's going to give you the strength to be able to get through this. You have it at home. The question you need to ask yourself is, what is it? What is it precisely that I know you have that's going to help you? And here I leave you with this thought. Do you know where Esa Ena El Hahara Me'ayin Yovo Esri? It's going to come from inside, from us. We have the capacity. We take to heart what Yocheved said, what Nechama Price said, take it to heart. We have it. It's biyodenu. We have the yacholes to be able to drill in and to do what we need to do to be able to help ourselves. And part of that is davening. We have the yacholes, the capacity to daven, to ask for siyata d'shmaya. That when we daven Mariv and we say Hashkivenu, there's a phrase in Hashkivenu, v'saknenu be'etzot tova milfanecha. It's up to us to ask God for God's help. Ma yesh lach babayis. I ask myself and we ask one another. I know we have something. But what is it that we have? And so as we begin this extraordinary conference that already began, there were a few sessions that preceded ours, but we're towards the beginning, designed to try to help us face all of our difficult challenges in this most complex and difficult time. So we recognize that this is, particularly Meron, is a Jewish story. It's a Jewish story. It's different than other stories. It's a Tzom Gedalia story. It's a Tzom Gedalia story. And because it's a Jewish story, we focus inside. And we think about the future. Rabbi Akiva, what an amazing human being and capacity. And we recognize maybe the most important thing. We recognize that Atadah right here is where the koach is. So let's not despair, and let's not feel derailed, and let's not feel overwhelmed. Let's try to take a deep breath and gird ourselves, look inside, and to be able to draw upon our own strengths with the help of all those around us whose help we can access, to be able to do what we can to get past this, to be able to have a future, and to be able to celebrate our own personal lives, to give nachama to those who need nachama, and to give chizuk and koach to those who have the capacity to be able to do what we can to persevere in the spite of all